for coming, for all of us taking the time on a Saturday. We know this is really important work. We're recording this program so we can share more broadly for those who aren't able to attend today. Before we start, I guess I feel the need to pause to speak to what I imagine many of us are feeling right now, is this extraordinary disconnect. A man's life was taken, another Black man's life was taken. Could have been my son, could have been your brother, and that life is gone. It was taken by a police officer, and this is a tragedy to us as humans. And yet the voice of legitimate protesters has been drowned out by rioters moving into our community, coming in to promote violence for violence sake. And we've all seen interviews of neighborhood residents suffering as a result. So our community, our businesses, in many cases our minority-owned businesses, have paid the price. And we all are worse off today than we were on Monday morning. And it's just madness. That said, already you're going to find armies of volunteers both in Minneapolis and St. Paul. And I will say that the mayor spoke well at this morning's press conference with the governor. He joined advocates from across Minnesota's landscape, many of whom have spoken in native languages, all expressing outrage at the intruders and the need to restore order. And Mayor Carter's here today to provide an update to the St. Paul community. And I know he and his team have been working through the night. So with most sincerity, Mayor Carter, welcome, and we look forward to hearing from you.
Thank you very much. I am sorry to have to engage you guys on a Saturday in this conversation. Obviously, it's necessary and it's needed. You're absolutely right about everything you just said, B. We're all worse off than we were on Monday. That was immediate when we woke up on Tuesday morning to such a harrowing image of that video of George Floyd being killed in such a destructive manner, with such little respect, such disdain for human life and human decency. I know that has shook all of us to our core. I haven't spoken to a single human being, whether that's conservative or progressive or Democrat or Republican, business owner, worker, police officer, a teacher. I had a police officer say to me earlier today just how disgusted they were by the video, and what he said was, "Listen, if I know there's a possibility I can get hurt on this job, but if I get hurt because somebody's mad because of something evil that somebody else did, some other knucklehead did, I'll be really disgusted by that." And I think that sums it up. I mean, I don't know anybody who can look at that video and not be disgusted by it. I'll tell you that if there's one thing I wish that I had right now that I think could make the biggest difference in this, it's some historical tool, some historical precedent to point to be able to tell the people in our community who are hurting and angry that of course, those officers will be held accountable for such a vile, such a blatant, such an egregious act caught on videotape, of course. But we all know that not only have we seen too many African-American men before George Floyd become hashtags, not only have we spent too much time fighting and praying for justice in situations like this, but we've seen very few charged, and when they are, among them, very few convicted and sentenced to prison time for such a wrongful taking of life. Those things conspire to create a level of energy, a level of anger, a level of rage that I think is legitimate, that I think is understandable, and in some ways, given the sequence of events that led up to today, again, not just this week, but over the last decade, as we've seen video after video after video after video after video, this level of anger is inevitable. At the same time, it is being expressed and manifested in ways that are just plain destructive and unacceptable. And I want to be clear, I'm making the distinction. Those folks who are out breaking windows and starting fires and vandalizing our buildings, I don't call them demonstrators. I don't call them protesters, because they're not. Those folks who looted Goodwill didn't do that on George Floyd's behalf or his family's behalf, because his family's been calling for peace. So while there's an enormous number of folks out right now, just who I think legitimately want to scream at the top of their lungs that George Floyd should still be alive, that all four of those officers, not just one, who are accountable for his death, should be held accountable, and that we ought to be doing every single thing we can imagine together to prevent this from happening again. I think there's an enormous amount of people out there who just want to scream that from the rooftops, and we're going to protect their right to be able to do so. But then there's also very clearly seems to be a group of people who largely aren't even from St. Paul, aren't a part of our community. We're talking to our friends and, contacts and, some of the folks who are the Black Lives Matter advocates, some of the folks who were first on the scene after Philando Castile was killed or Jamar Clark was killed. And to a person, when I ask them, what are you seeing? What are you hearing? What are you feeling? The first thing they say to me is, we don't know these folks. These aren't our folks. I misspoke in our press conference earlier when I said all, but the truth is most of the people who we arrested last night for curfew violations are from out of state. We have people who have come to our state specifically for the purpose of lighting a fire, specifically for the purpose of breaking windows. When I hear reporters, I've had a couple of reporters ask me the same question. So, well, there was unrest last night in Minneapolis, so clearly the curfew didn't work. That's inaccurate. There's not any reasonable read that would say that folks who packed a bag and came to Minnesota for the purpose of starting mayhem or being destructive are going to look at a mayoral executive order on a curfew and go, confound it, now we can't pour Molotov cocktails. The purpose of the executive order is to ask everybody else, the folks who are frustrated, who are tired, who are fed up, who legitimately want to keep the focus on George Floyd and the unjust nature of his death, to ask them to stay home, to ask you to stay home, to ask us as a community to keep our sons and daughters and nephews and grandchildren home, so that we can isolate the individuals who woke up this morning seeking to cause havoc and destruction in our community, and so that our first responders, our police officers, can focus on getting them off of our streets. We have amassed with the governor. We have requested a significant level of assistance with our National Guard. I want to tell you the volume of people that we've seen in the streets has been unprecedented. St. Paul has never seen anything like this. Minnesota has never seen anything like this. I'm on the phone with mayors from across the country who are devastated, who are in cities that have just literally never seen anything like this. There's no way for St. Paul by ourselves to respond to the enormous crisis that this is creating for our communities. And so we have assembled in partnership with the governor, in partnership with Minneapolis and other local jurisdictions, in partnership with the state troopers and the Metro Transit Police and even the University of Minnesota Police, the largest peacekeeping force ever assembled in our state's history to address this. We expect a significant number of National Guardsmen and women on the ground in St. Paul today to help us address this. Chief Axtell has sent an all-call with the St. Paul Police Department. We're all hands on deck to address this. I want to tell you that one thing, if one thing is absolutely abundantly clear in St. Paul right now, it's that our firefighters, our first responders, our police officers just have no quit in them, as they have just continued to serve our city with distinction and commit and this incredible level of commitment, despite in some areas, in some moments, particularly on Thursday night, working with bottles and rocks being thrown at them. They continue to fight those fires. They continue to try to keep the peace and keep the calm. And their leadership is something that has just stood between St. Paul and even greater calamity than what we've already seen. Ultimately, I'm asking you to use your networks, to use your social media platforms, to say through your employees or whatever channels that you have, that today it's time for folks to stay home. And I can assure you, I'm looking you in the eyes through the computer. I can assure you that I don't take lightly the notion of asking for National Guard support. I don't take lightly the notion of issuing a citywide curfew. There are moments in our lives where we look up in our communities, where we look up. I'm sure there are moments in your businesses where you look up and all the optimal choices, all the good choices, all the things that you'd rather do are all off the table. And you got to figure out something to do to make the most of a moment that you found yourself in. That's where we are as a city. It's time for people to stay home. It's time for us to let you know, to let every business owner, to let every worker, to let every grandparent, because one of the things that we're seeing, you know, the real crisis of all of this is we are facing so many levels of emergency and so many levels of crisis right now, from a COVID-19 pandemic to the economic crisis, to the traumatization of that video, to the destruction of our community. And, you know, when we have, you know, seniors in our city who can't get medicine because their pharmacy has been destroyed, families that can't get food because their grocery store has been destroyed, folks who can't get gas. I don't know where to get gas. I don't know where the closest place to my home is that I would be able to get gas because our gas stations have been looted and burned and are closed. That just further victimizes, further traumatizes those of us who have already been traumatized. The simple truths that we're standing on is this: we will not accept unarmed Black men being killed, particularly by law enforcement. We will not accept it. And we will not accept the destruction of our community. There are some who want to try to convince us that those are two opposing goals, but we know that they're one and the same. And that's going to be the ethic and the driving force that drives us today, tomorrow, and into the future. Thanks much. I'm happy to take any questions.
Excellent. Thank you, sir, for those comments. We do have a few, and I had collected some in advance of this morning or this afternoon's webinar here. The first question is, would martial law be considered?
Would martial law be considered? I honestly don't know that that's even a call that I'm able to make. I'll say, you know, the ground truth that we're facing is evolving rapidly. Like I said, we have activated, the governor has activated the largest activation of the Minnesota National Guard in history. So, you know, our goal is to have a significant number of assets on the ground to help us out. And as the ground truth evolves, my goal is to be in touch and in communication with all of you. This is the third digital roundtable like this that we did today. We've already done one with leaders, and particularly in our community of color and faith leaders across our community. And so through these channels, I think we've connected with probably nearly 1,000 people over the last few days. And so our first goal is going to be to continue to maintain both the basic life, health, and safety standards that we have for our community. Our goal is going to be to continue to protect the rights of those protesters, the actual legitimate protesters and demonstrators, to peacefully exercise their First Amendment rights, to peacefully and safely exercise their First Amendment rights. And our goal is going to be to communicate with you all. Sometimes I'll be communicating with you the things that I don't know, but I want you to know what I do know. And I want you to know kind of how we're thinking of approaching this so that we're staying in communication with one another.
Thank you. Next question, you spoke a little bit to the curfew last night. Was it effective? But the second half of that question, do you expect this to continue? I would say this represents a tenor that I've heard from many business owners, which is they really want to figure out how to operate moving forward, right? You know, what to expect, what to prepare for. So do you expect last night's level of violence to continue into Monday and the next week?
It's honestly hard to know what to prepare for. For example, yesterday we were braced for anything to happen, and we ended up seeing most of the activity over in Minneapolis yesterday. So it's hard to know what to expect. It's clear that what started off looking like a small organic. Just community-based kind of protest has quickly transformed into what feels like sophisticated, coordinated, intentional agitation and incitement to riot, to arson, to vandalism. And so, our goal is going to be to interrupt all of that as swiftly and as assertively as possible. And my hope is that we can find our way on the other side of this. I don't know what to expect or how long to expect it for, but I can guarantee you that just like I said about our first responders, our police officers, and our firefighters, that anybody who will come to St. Paul for the purpose of creating destruction will find that there is absolutely no quit in this city, and the extent of our determination to protect each other and to keep each other safe.
Thank you. Next question is, and this came around a bit yesterday too, rumors. How do we find out? Is there a method for finding out about planned protests? Or, I'd heard rumors that this might be happening in downtown, or someone says here, I heard rumors of one at the 600 block of Selby tonight. Do you have any sense of that?
We're tracking a million rumors at a time. For example, again, yesterday I had a number of different rumors about a number of different things that were supposedly going to be active in our city, and none of them panned out. It seems like there are, some way in which folks are communicating. I don't know the answer to this question, but my question is, how do 500 people know to meet at this certain place at this certain time? And I know we have folks kind of track down and figure out the answers to those types of questions. So that is to say, the truth is there are planned protests, and the ones that are posted and planned and notified that we know are happening are the legitimate peaceful protests where people are chanting and singing and shouting and demonstrating with the focus on George Floyd, with the focus on his family, with the focus on the extent to which we have a great work to do to change the course of our country and keep this from happening ever again. And so we don't have a way yet to predict where the incitement, where the agitation, and where those places that are going to be targeted for the kind of extreme destruction. We don't have a way to predict that ahead of time. What I will tell you is we do have a way to monitor it and to identify those spaces and get first responders there as quickly as possible to try to help just break that momentum wherever we can. The volume of people has been, frankly, overwhelming. It's been something unprecedented, something we've never seen before. And with the assistance of those other agencies that I was talking about, with the assistance in particular of significant capacity support from the National Guard, we will hopefully have the capacity to address whatever need arises.
A question about you're offering any recommendations. This particular business owner is located on Snelling and hasn't boarded windows yet, and wondering is that being recommended? Is there any advice for businesses to prepare?
If you have the capacity to, especially in that Midway area that we saw targeted a couple of nights ago, I imagine I would. I know a number of those businesses, and it's devastating to drive up to University Avenue and see all that plywood as folks are boarding up their businesses, and some doing it because a window got smashed in, and some doing it to prevent their windows from being smashed in. I know a lot of folks are making that decision. I know that's probably a deeply personal decision for all of you because you have so much into those businesses. I imagine that if I owned a business right in that zone, I probably would.
Okay, thank you. Next question is, what conversations, if any, are being had with the presidents and CEOs of Minnesota's Fortune 500 companies? What are they saying and or doing?
What I've told you about our human spirit, and one of the amazing things, and I was going to close on this conversation, is you drive down University Avenue today, you'll see people out with brooms, with shovels, with bags, with trash cans, with sponges, with all kinds of stuff to just clean. And the amazing thing, the thing that I love most about St. Paul, it can be found on University Avenue right now. It's that those folks aren't helping to clean their uncle's store, their aunt's store. We have dozens of people, if not hundreds of people, out across our city right now who just felt that was ugly, that's horrible, I hate that happened, and I want to go help somebody. And they're helping strangers, and they're helping neighbors, and they're helping businesses, and they're just going to go pick up somewhere where they see a mess, and that's beautiful. Our corporate partners do the same thing, and so I've been in touch with some of those leaders of our biggest businesses downtown and across our city, and they, while they work to keep their own employees safe, while they work to keep their own facilities secure, many of our corporate partners, and I can include Target in this, who has seen breathtaking damages and have already promised the South Minneapolis community that they'll rebuild that store. They're figuring out ways to kind of coordinate contributions of formula and diapers and things like that to families who need them. And it's beautiful to see the extent to which, even in our ugliest moments, I've learned you can set your clock, you can set your watch by the beautiful spirit of community that arises, particularly in St. Paul, maybe particularly in Minnesota, in a moment like this. Our corporate leaders are standing forward. I stay in contact with them on a somewhat regular basis and appreciate the work that they're doing. While I am sure there's an enormous amount of work to keep all of those companies operational through this crisis, to have time to think about the well-being of the city as well. It bodes well for us. My dog agrees.
Is there a tip line or a call or an email if folks are either seeing rioters or, for that matter, they know where someone is accumulating stolen goods?
That's a good question. I mean, I would say I don't think we set up a separate tip line. We have our of course, 911 if you think that you're in danger, there's something that's imminent danger to persons or property. Encourage everyone to just call 911 directly. We also have the police non-emergency line at 651-291-1111. And so, if there's a moment that, isn't like that impending, I need an officer here as soon as possible crisis, but I just want you guys to know about this. That's a good number to use for that, 651-291-1111.
Okay. Are you planning to extend the curfew?
The curfew was in place for last night and tonight based on the executive order that I've already signed. Like I said before, we don't know it's obviously extendable. We don't know what the ground truth will be tomorrow or the following day. It's very possible that we'll extend the curfew, but no decision has been made on that yet. And I honestly don't know. That's not like one of these no decisions have been made on it yet. I honestly don't know.
Fair enough. This is an important one. Lots of detail here. The Hmong business owners would like to know if the city of St. Paul would offer any help for those businesses that were vandalized due to the protest of George Floyd's death. And in tandem with that is, since one of the officers who was involved as a Hmong officer, now the African American people are also targeting the Hmong communities, making threats to people on social media. Hmong people have already been traumatized with COVID-19, and being Asian, now adding this incident, the Hmong are fearful about their safety. What would the mayor say and assure the Hmong communities? What should the Hmong people do? So help for those who've been vandalized, and what do we do for those who are feeling targeted?
Ultimately, I'd say this is exactly what I was just describing when I said those of us who have already been most vulnerable those of us who have already been those communities that have already been most traumatized are being re-traumatized again and again kind of through this moment. That's something that's a challenge, and that's why we need the support from our National Guard and our other law enforcement partners to ensure our neighborhoods, that they'll see the police presence out, that when you call 911, that somebody will be on their way as soon as we can possibly figure out how to get to you, that we can kind of continue to protect all of our neighborhoods in the way that we've come to expect, that we've come to know in St. Paul is absolutely critical. And so, we've spoken up, and I'll continue to speak up in regards to the COVID crisis, in regards to this, against, and in regard to anything, against painting any group of people, any broader group of people with a broad brush, right? In this moment, our African-American community, African-American young men like me are speaking up to just shout at the top of our lungs. When you see me, don't assume that I'm a criminal. Don't make assumptions of who I am, outside of what you know about me and how I engage with you. Our law enforcement partners, our police officers, in particular right now, are desperately hoping that people don't take the actions of those 4 officers as blanket representative of every single officer. In the same way, we can't, it would of course be a grave mistake to charge every person of Hmong origin with the failures of that one particular officer. And so, I speak up every chance I get, and am in this scenario again against doing that type of action, that type of targeting. That's disgusting. I think you're right. I'm hopeful that we'll be able to work with the state and perhaps even the federal government to create some type of reconstruction fund, maybe to help businesses with copay or the deductible kind of costs as you all rebuild. I'll tell you just the practical constraint that I'm under right now is the pot of money that I would look to do that. We just sort of drained en route to creating that St. Paul Bridge Fund to help small businesses through this economic crisis. And so we're kind of at the drawing board financially in terms of how we stand up a fund like that. But it's certainly something that is on the radar for us.
And I want to check in on your time, sir. It's 3:03. Do you have a few more minutes for some questions?
I don't know.
Do you need to be out?
I don't know. I just talk until somebody tells me I have to go somewhere else. Yeah, I probably have a couple of minutes left, but literally like about the next 4 minutes or so, and then got to jump on
All right.
Another call.
All right. I'm trying to wrap up a bunch of these calls into one. In light of the escalation seen in Minneapolis, can you speak to the key buildings and infrastructure in St. Paul downtown? How do I'm thinking about whether the Capitol, can you speak to how the National Guard or the police are being deployed in St. Paul tonight?
One of the specific, the specifics of deployment are obviously operational kind of details that our police department is not sharing. One of the goals for us, frankly, I have a lot of, our police chief, Todd Axtell, has spent his entire career gaining the trust and rapport that he has with our community members, and particularly within our communities of color. Those relationships, that rapport, that history is serving us really well right now. Our administration, of course, has gone all in on this community first public safety framework that has, I think, reassured neighbors that we know the extent to which our physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual health and economic health have everything to do, and aesthetic health of our community has everything to do with the public safety outcomes that we experience as a community. We've changed our use of force policies in St. Paul. I was on national media and they said, given what happened to George Floyd, like what changes would you make? And what I told them is ultimately, as far as the city of St. Paul is concerned, we've already made them, and we're already in the process of making them. And so, that's due in no small part to the service of our police chief, the service of our police officers, who really focus on community engagement. I think about what Chief Axtell always says. Two things Chief Axtell always says that I've quoted a lot this week is, one is he talks about our bank of trust, and this notion that by the time you have to make a withdrawal, you better hope you've made a lot of deposits over a long period of time. And those officers in Minneapolis made a withdrawal for us this week, and we know that they set our work back significantly. But then the second thing is these 3 questions Chief Axe always asks our officers. Was it about their actions? Was it reasonable? Was it necessary? Was it done with respect? And if you can answer yes to all 3 of those, then we're probably in a pretty decent space. If you can't answer yes to all those 3 of those, we have some other conversations to have. Ultimately, that is to say, my goal is to keep St. Paul police officers on the front line, St. Paul police officers engaging with protesters and demonstrators who are legitimately protesting and engaging, St. Paul police officers engaging with our community. So very specifically, we've asked the National Guard to kind of be on point for us to help us secure some of those like strategic and locations while in ways that can free our St. Paul police officers up to be out in Midway and out downtown and out across our community, serving our community like only they can do well. I don't mean to say like
final question.
They can do well. I'm sorry. I don't mean to say like only they can do well as a slight on those other agencies. But one of the things that we know is, I always say, you gotta know what's right in the community before you can really be most effective at fixing what's wrong. And our St. Paul police officers just know the terrain. They know the people in a way that I believe our St. Paul police officers can be most effective at helping us to on the front line to maintain as much calm as we can. Sorry, what were you going to say?
And I know you have to leave. So I just have one final question, which is the biggest question for business as we're getting ready for Monday. Is there a sense of there's so much uncertainty still? There's a standby till Sunday to hear more about. There's folks who are doing restoration or their utilities, or they're working at night because they've got to work at night to keep the phones on and the utilities going and frankly serve the companies who've been vandalized. They've got to do that work. Uncertain. How do we prepare for Monday? Do you tell us to wait till Sunday for more information, or how would you respond to that question?
I'm sure it's unsatisfying, and I know that I'm answering a lot of questions with a I'm not sure yet, and we're not 100% sure yet. What I can tell you is when I know, as I find out things, as I know things, you'll know things. Unfortunately, I mean, here's the thing: our ground truth in St. Paul, it's Saturday, and we're a fundamentally different state than we were even on Wednesday. If you had asked me on Wednesday or even Thursday morning where we'd be on Saturday, there's no possible way I'd have predicted that we'd be where we are here today. And so, like I said, this seems to be very coordinated. This seems to be very intentional. This seems to be a very strategic thing that we're up against. We're going to try to figure out how to take some of the air out of the tires, figuratively speaking, on it. I can't hazard a speculation on where we'll be a few days from now, other than every single moment of every single day between now and then, we're going to both be working to execute those missions I described to you earlier, and to figure out how to turn the page as rapidly as we possibly can in our city. And that I'm committing to all of you all that we are going to continue to stay incredibly communicative with you. There will be times when I give you an update that's just, there's no update, but I want to make sure that we are staying in touch, that we're keeping the communication flowing. And I think that's going to be a critical piece of our ability to maintain cohesive as one community.
So maybe we can commit to at least one more update on Sunday afternoon as we think about entering into Monday for more guidance.
Let's work together with our team. And again, I don't mean to be uncommittal. I have some family engagements today that I promised to be at that I'm not at. And so I want to make sure that we're navigating, and I don't want to tell you I'll be somewhere if the ground truth is going to change, and I'm not able to keep that promise. Okay. But let's make sure, I'll make sure that my team stays in touch with you. Certainly something I'm open and willing to do if we have the capacity to be able to.
Great, thank you. Thank you, sir, for your time. Folks, while the mayor has to step away, we've got some information for you based on questions you've asked. We'll spend a few more minutes going over that. That was great. Just briefly, a couple of other questions that were asked here relative to guidance and direction information. There is a let me go back to my notes here. All right, so directing businesses who are needing guidance, assistance, direction, information. I want to make sure you know about the Pay It Forward program that we've got in partnership with the city and the county and others. And that is on the Chamber's website. That offers technical guidance, support, information. It's at stpaulchamber.com/payitforward. And that is connecting you to technical assistance and volunteers, and there's multiple languages available. Ramsey County Small Business Relief Fund, that's up to $7,500 in grants for businesses under $100 million in revenue. That website is ramseycountymeansbusiness.com/relief-fund. We'll put this up on our website too. Also, staff in the mayor's office is coordinating business requests for assistance with fortifying their locations. And I saw that Paul Davis, one of the posts here, was that they're helping companies as well. Note from the mayor's office here, Deputy Mayor Tincher. Incident command and operations are still working together. We can and should lean into that infrastructure for communication and coordination. Thank you for saying that out loud. We'll make sure and do that. You'll hear from us again this weekend. Utility companies, it does sound like the cell outages have been resolved this morning, but telecom fiber repairs continue. The concern is that these employees need police protection, and that has not yet been resolved. The Department of Commerce has created an insurance claims tips document. We'll post on our website under our resources, designed for business owners and containing information on making and filing insurance claims on damaged property. We've already seen some scam emails come through. Folks are saying, hey, we're here to help. We're the response team. I would just ask that you be very cautious about that because they've already started. The customer service center for the Department of Commerce is consumer.protection@state.mn.us. And that phone number, again, for Commerce's Consumer Services Center is 651-539-1600. Curfews, you do know St. Paul, Minneapolis, and Dakota County also curfews as of 8 p.m. I did clarify all the way up to the governor's office that if you're actually doing work, whether you're healthcare, first responders, utilities, boarding up, if you're doing work to board up a building, though you are exempted from that. It's simply about staying out of the way if you can, as much as you can, please, when you can. And in terms of small businesses, I would one final call to you if you'd be willing to sign up for our emails, because we get as much out via our email distribution list as we do any other way, and it's proven to be kind of a fluid situation, and that would help. So sign up for them if you like. And I see if I've got one more note from the Deputy Mayor. No, I think that's good. All right, so let me take one more look to see if there are any other Q&As that have come up since the Mayor left. And thank you for jumping in. I know this was sudden. It was sudden for me too. I had my swimsuit on. I was heading out the door. And this is what it is, people. So Ramsey County's fund was only for COVID-19 and COVID relief. I'm going to follow up on that. As I understand it, it's being made available. So that being said, we'll end the recording. We'll make it available for everyone. Stand by in case you do need, in case we do another one of these over the weekend. Thank you, everybody. Stay safe, and we'll be in touch soon.